What's up, Falcons Nation? It's your boy Jew coming at you with another episode of What's the Word Dirty Bird. As we come to you every Wednesday at 7 p.m. We're gonna get some quick shout outs in, but I appreciate you guys tuning in for our second episode of What's the Word Dirty Bird. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump in to the chat really quick and say what's up to you guys. Atlanta Nation in the building. What's going on, man? He says ATL. Yeah, we in the building. We got Kojak. What's the word, Dirty Bird? I love the name. I love the content. I love to hear it, man. I appreciate you, as always, tuning in. Joseph Thornton, what's happening? He said, what up, AFN? What's going on, man? We're going to jump into some things here. What's up to everybody in the chat? Y'all definitely go ahead and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button for your boy. You guys go over not only to my channel at Jew Talk Sports and hit that subscribe button, but also here at AFN, Atlanta Falcons Nation. Definitely go over and hit that like and subscribe button there. And everybody a part of the crew, Mad Mike Sports, Just K Styles, Miss Maggie T, Twisted Torch TV, J Rock. Y'all go over and hit that like button, subscribe button for the whole crew here at AFN. But with that being said, we're going to jump right into some topics. The nation in the building. He said, what up, Jew? What's going on? We're going to get into some things. What up to everybody in the chat? What up? How y'all Wednesday going? What's up? We're going to jump into some things here. So let's jump into the first topic. We're going to jump into some Atlanta Falcons news real quick. So first off, today in Atlanta Falcons news, Calvin Ridley. He hasn't been at minicamp, mandatory minicamp, and news broke today that Calvin Ridley actually had a foot injury. So they say he had minor foot surgery. Is what it had said. So basically, I don't really see this as a huge deal for our Atlanta Falcons, being that they're saying that this was minor surgery. They talked to Arthur Smith today during his press conference. He basically stated that a lot of players are dealing with different things, and he expects Calvin Ridley to be back at some point at training camp, and they're just taking things slow. So we're going to hope for the best, because now that Julio Jones is gone, we know that Calvin Ridley is the number one wide receiver for our Atlanta Falcons. So we can't afford for him to go down, especially with a serious injury. We know last year, I believe Calvin Ridley had an ankle injury, but he played most of the season. He had a really good season last year, over 1,300 yards receiving, led the team in receiving yards, led the team in touchdowns. So I'm not too concerned until I hear more about this foot injury. And we kind of have to play the wait and see approach when it comes to a foot injury and minor surgery. We just hope that he's healthy come week one of the season. I'm not too worried about Calvin Ridley playing in the preseason, and I'm not too worried about him playing or being at training camp too much. I do expect him to sit out a little bit, but we just hope and cross our fingers, knock on some wood, and hope that Calvin Ridley, is rehabbing and he comes back completely healthy, because we know when Calvin Ridley's on the field and he's 100%, he's definitely one of the best younger receivers in the league. I definitely think he's ready to take on that number one pass catching role for our Atlanta Falcons. But we're going to definitely see what Calvin Ridley can do this year as the number one guy under Arthur Smith in this new scheme. That is one of the concerns that I have with Calvin Ridley, though. If this injury does keep him out of training camp, or if it does keep him out of the preseason games or all of the preseason games, is his timing with Matt Ryan and him under this new scheme, getting comfortable under this new scheme. But I do think that from what they're saying, it's just minor surgery. So it's not something to be too concerned about right now, because we still have about 90-something days, 80-something days to the season kicks off. We have about 2 to 3 months before the season is going to actually kick off. So I expect Calvin Ridley to be there game one against the Philadelphia Eagles. We're just going to have to keep watching this to make sure it doesn't turn into something serious. But at this point, I do think Calvin Ridley, a guy that's looking for a new contract, he's going into that 5th-year option that the Falcons picked up. So it's really, really It's going to be really, really key for him to stay healthy and prove that he's healthy, because we've seen how things turned out with a guy like Julio Jones. And if Calvin Ridley wants that big contract, he's going to have to stay healthy so he can get that big hefty contract, which I think he will get that big contract. But it's going to come down to his performance this season, and it's going to come down to his health. So I wish Calvin Ridley nothing but the best, and I do expect Calvin Ridley to be back some point closer to the season. From what they're saying, they don't expect him to miss any time. But this is the first thing I'm hearing about this injury, this foot injury, this minor surgery that he's had. So we're going to just have to let things play out. But I'm going to jump right in, back into the chat really quick, because we had some new people jump right in. We have Miss Asia Green. What's going on, Asia? She's always in the show, one of our moderators. What's up to you? We got Carrie in the building. What's going on, Miss Carrie? Jabari in the building. What's going on, man? Mr. Motivator, what's going on? We got the queen of AFN in the building, Miss Maggie T. What's going on, Miss Maggie? Y'all keep Miss Maggie in prayer. What's going on, Miss Maggie? Mr. Lee in the building. What's going on, Mr. Lee? He says, my concern is baby center and baby left guard. Okay. We got my boy Devon in the building. What's going on, Devon? He says, I believe Calvin will be fine before the season starts. He'll be ready and good before then. Yeah, I agree with you. I think Calvin really will be ready to go when it's all said and done. So we're going to jump into another topic, but we got Ezekiel, the king of it. What's going on, man? Miss Carrie, she got a comment here. Let's see. Just saw a headline on NBC Sports saying Tannehill is an upgrade for Matt Ryan. For Julio, what a joke. Did they forget we got Smith, who made Tannehill who he is? And I like this comment right here by Miss Carrie before we jump into the next topic. I completely agree with you. And I kind of want to talk about this really quick before I get into my next topic, because I've really been getting kind of ticked off from what I'm seeing when it comes down to the Atlanta Falcons and why the Atlanta Falcons are hated so much. Prior to Julio Jones being traded and prior to all of the stuff coming out about him and Shannon Sharp on Undisputed with him saying he was out of there, we all thought that we were going to have that three-headed monster of Julio, Calvin Ridley, and Kyle Pitts. We thought we were going to have that three-headed monster going into them, but it turns out, that once all of the information came out about Julio Jones, he stated what he stated on Undisputed. We end up trading him to Tennessee. And what baffles me with this whole situation and why I feel that the media pretty much hates our Atlanta Falcons is we were saying all along when we drafted Kyle Pitts that we had an explosive offense, that we were going to be one of the best offenses in the league, and that we possibly would be playoff contenders. And I was saying even maybe Super Bowl contenders. And a lot of people laughed at that. Even the media, they basically were stating that they didn't think our Atlanta Falcons were going to have a good season this year. I think they had us down to only win about 7 to 8 games this season. But soon as Julio Jones is traded to a team like Tennessee, which I really feel like this was a lateral move for a guy like Julio Jones, I don't feel that Tennessee necessarily is an upgrade over our Atlanta Falcons. If you look at our teams, they're very similar, and both of us have high-powered offenses. If you look at the Tennessee Titans, now they have a three-headed monster with Ryan Tannehill, Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, and King Henry in the backfield. So it would have been a lot similar to our Atlanta Falcons offense with Matt Ryan, Julio, Calvin Ridley, and Kyle Pitts. And that's the reason that I thought our Atlanta Falcons were going to be Super Bowl contenders, or why our Atlanta Falcons would make a deep playoff run. But what's funny to me is when Julio was on the Falcons and we drafted Kyle Pitts, a lot of the media was saying that they didn't think the Atlanta Falcons were going to have a good season. Basically, they wanted us to take a quarterback in the draft. And now that Julio Jones is on another team with the Tennessee Titans, everybody's picking the Titans and saying the Titans are going to be Super Bowl contenders and make a deep playoff push. So it just goes to show you that the media just doesn't like our Atlanta Falcons. Kerry made a good point by saying, and I've been saying the same exact thing. Colin Cowherd put on Twitter. He had, I actually retweeted it on Twitter where he was talking about he really feels that Julio Jones going over to the Tennessee Titans doesn't make them one of the Super Bowl contenders, basically, because he talked about the other great teams over in the AFC and how stacked the AFC is. If you look at the teams like the Kansas City Chiefs, if you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, if you look at the Baltimore Ravens, if you look at the Buffalo Bills, who made it to the AFC Championship game last year, the New England Patriots is a team that retooled in the offseason and added a lot of pieces. It's a lot of teams in the AFC that's going to give Tennessee a hard time if they make it to the playoffs, and they're going to give them a run for their money. So I really think that Tennessee is a lot similar to our Atlanta Falcons because both of us have great offenses, but neither of us have good defenses. Last year, Tennessee's defense wasn't good. And last year, our Atlanta Falcons defense was atrocious. So I really look at the Atlanta Falcons and the Tennessee Titans as similar teams. I'm not too sure of the Tennessee Titans offensive coordinator now that Arthur Smith has left. Kerry made the good point by stating basically Ryan Tannehill was on his way out of the league when he was let go by the Miami Dolphins. He was the backup for Marcus Mariota originally in Tennessee, and Arthur Smith was the main reason he got a new contract. He basically resurrected Ryan Tannehill's career 2 years ago, and Ryan Tannehill ended up winning the Offensive Player of the Year. So I definitely don't believe that Ryan Tannehill is a better quarterback than the Matt Ryan. I really think that it's kind of disrespectful for how the media is downplaying Matt Ryan. If you basically look at Matt Ryan's resume, him and Ryan Tannehill, there's basically no comparison. Matt Ryan is a guy who's won Offensive Player of the Year, won an MVP, and played in the Super Bowl, won Rookie of the Year. So he pretty much has every accolade. And I mentioned this in one of our last shows that we did here on AFN. And on my channel, I talk about it all the time. Pretty much Matt Ryan has won every award you can win as a quarterback. The only thing that Matt Ryan needs on his resume at this point is a Super Bowl championship. But comparing him and Ryan Tannehill, to me, Matt Ryan is in a whole nother stratosphere when it comes to those two players. I do think that Ryan Tannehill is a solid quarterback. I do think that he's in the middle tier, maybe a top 10 quarterback in the league. And he's on the uptick, but I don't think that he's on Matt Ryan's level at this point. Matt Ryan has been in the league for 13 seasons. He's a wildly veteran, a guy who's been around, and I put Matt Ryan in that elite category with the Tom Brady's, with the Drew Breeses, because Matt Ryan has played against these guys and beaten a lot of these guys under pressure situations in the playoffs. A lot of people don't talk about Matt Ryan has beaten Aaron Rodgers. He beat Aaron Rodgers in the NFC Championship game in 2016. Matt Ryan has beat the Seattle Seahawks. He beat that Legion of Boom team in 2012. And then he turned around and beat the Legion of Boom team again in 2016 before they blew that team up. So Matt Ryan has pretty much done everything that you can pretty much ask of a quarterback at this point. So I definitely think that was a good statement that you made, Kerry. And with Julio Jones leaving, I really feel like Julio Jones just made a lateral move. I don't believe that the move that he made was an upgrade over our Atlanta Falcons. Personally, I think that the Atlanta Falcons was a better fit for a guy like Julio Jones because Matt Ryan is, to me, a better quarterback than Ryan Tannehill. And I feel like Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts are better than the weapons that are around him in Tennessee. Other than King Henry, I really think that in every other position, I would take a Calvin Ridley over AJ Brown, and I'm definitely taking Kyle Pitts and Hayden Hurst over Fisker, who's the tight end over there in Tennessee. So with that being said, I'm gonna jump into some more of you guys' comments really quick. Let's see here. So we got Jack King in the building. What's Jack King saying? He says Ryan needs a better O-line, and that's a great point. Matt Ryan definitely needs a great O-line. Needs that protection. In 2016, we seen when Matt Ryan was protected, and anytime he's been here in Atlanta, when he's been protected with a good offensive line and a solid running game, Matt Ryan is deadly. when he has a running game and when he has an offensive line. He's just that much better. Even without an offensive line, he religiously throws for 4,000 yards a season. Even when he's had poor offensive lines, even when he's getting sacked 30 and 40 times a season, he's still putting up big numbers. And if you go look at the statistics of quarterbacks under pressure, under blitz, blitz pressure and things of that nature, Matt Ryan is one of the best quarterbacks under pressure. So I definitely like the comment by Jack King, basically stating that Matt Ryan is one of those guys that needs protection, which every quarterback needs protection. If you look at guys like Tom Brady, who's not pretty much athletic at all, he has no running ability. You need a good offense, a solid offensive line in front of you. And I say this all the time: it starts up front in the trench, in the trenches, trench warfare on the offensive line and defensive line. That's where the game is won and lost. And pretty much that's been the downfall of our Atlanta Falcons the last couple years under Dan Quinn, is we didn't have a solid running game. We didn't have an offensive coordinator or play caller that understood matchups, and we didn't have an offensive coordinator that wanted to run the ball and wanted to play physical football. So I expect this new regime with Terry Fontenot coming over from the Saints. The Saints are known for having a good offensive line and defensive line, and the same thing for the Tennessee Titans. They've had a great offensive line. King Henry ran for 2,000 yards last season. So I definitely expect our Atlanta Falcons to do big things this year under Arthur Smith. And I definitely think that Arthur Smith is a huge upgrade over a guy like Dirk Cutter, who's no longer in the league. I think he retired from coaching. So definitely think that we're going to have a great season this year with a coach like Arthur Smith. But I definitely agree with that comment. The offensive line is very important. Let's see. We got Michael Walker in the chat. What's going on, Michael? He says the coaches are going to keep us focused. I definitely agree. Arthur Smith is one of those guys that has come in so far and seems like he has these guys ready to play, laser focused. And I completely agree with that. We need the coaches to coach these players up, put these players in good positions, because over the last couple seasons, we know that the coaches didn't put these guys in the best positions to succeed. And I talked about that in our last show. Basically, we lost 8 games where it was one possession game and we should have won. We lost the games against the Lions, scoring a touchdown where we could have just kneeled and kicked the game-winning field goal. And we allowed Matthew Stafford to drive the ball down the field and score a game-winning touchdown. The game against the Dallas Cowboys, the onside kick, the infamous onside kick where players didn't go after the football. That's coaching. Even though you expect these players to know what to do in certain situations, you can see clearly in that Dallas game that those players were told not to touch the football. And that was the wrong thing for the coaches to tell the players. We know that anytime there's an onside kick, it's a live football. So you want to go after the ball, be aggressive. So we definitely know that these coaches over the last couple seasons didn't do a good job of putting these guys in positions where they could succeed. So I completely agree. Let's see here. Now I want to get into my next topic real quick, and we're going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons minicamp. So as we know, mandatory minicamp did kick off on Tuesday, and Arthur Smith has been meeting with the media, it seems like every day since mandatory minicamps have kicked off. He met with the media on Tuesday and today, and basically he just talked about right now we're installing the offense, installing the defense, getting these guys used to lining up. He basically stated that there will be no padded practices because it's against league rules. So right now it's all about the mental side of football, and I talk about it all the time. That football is just not physical, but it's a lot more mental than physical. Remembering plays, remembering the snap count, and just the small nuances of the game. If you remember over the last couple seasons, we've been terrible at pre-snap penalties. I don't know how many times I've seen guys jump off sides, and that's mainly mental. So I definitely think that Arthur Smith, he said he's tasking these guys, and they're basically wearing these guys out when it comes to their mental, trying to see how much information these guys can retain, because that's going to be important, especially on the offensive line. Communication is key. On the offensive line, communication is key. As far as knowing the audibles, knowing the snap counts and things of that nature. They talked to Chris Lindstrom today. If you guys didn't get to hear, he talked to the media, and basically Chris Lindstrom kind of talked about the similar things He talked about it's a new language, so we got to learn the communication. He talked about communicating with a guy like Matt Hennessy, who's coming into his second year. And I believe Matt Hennessy will be the starter at center, but it's going to be a battle between him and Drew Dahlman at that center position. But he mainly talked about, him and Arthur Smith talked about Matt Hennessy being a lot more vocal and being the guy who's going to be making the calls up front. Center is the captain of the offensive line, and his job is to call out the Mike linebacker. His job is to do all of the shift changes on the line. If he sees somebody blitzing, his job is to point out blitzers and things of that nature and to make sure these guys are set and know who to pick up on certain plays. So it's going to be very important for this offensive line to continue to gel. Like I said, it's a lot more mental than you think. And I like that Arthur Smith is bringing that physicality back to this offensive line. A couple weeks ago, they talked to a guy like Jake Matthews, and he basically stated, he's happy to finally get back to running the football and not always being on his heels, pass protecting, but allowing these guys to use their size and their physicality. Another thing that I think that we have to keep an eye on, because it's going to be a lot of battles on that offensive line, is Jake Matthews. Jake Matthews is or not Jake Matthews, excuse me, Jalen Mayfield, a guy that we brought in from Michigan. From what I heard today, they had him lined up at right tackle because Caleb McGarry missed practice today. He wasn't at minicamp, a mandatory minicamp. And also, Matt Gono was not in attendance. So basically, they had a guy like Jalen Mayfield, who when he was drafted out of Michigan, is a guy that can also play right tackle and he can play the guard position. And that was the reason why they wanted a player like Jalen Mayfield, because he's really big, strong guy, 6'5", 320 plus pounds. And he's a guy that you can use in a run game and use his physicality. But he's also a guy that you can use as a swing tackle if someone goes down with injury. So I definitely think that Terry Fontenot did an excellent job in the draft in bringing in guys that can actually play multiple positions. He brought in guys that are like Swiss Army knives that you can move all over the offensive line. And Jalen Mayfield is one of those guys I think we need to keep an eye on, because he could be pushing a player like Caleb McGarry, whether Caleb McGarry is going to be pushed to play the guard position or whether Caleb McGarry may be pushed out of the starting lineup. Personally, I think in the end, Caleb McGarry, because of his experience, I expect him to win that right tackle role and continue to be the right tackle. And I think a guy like Jalen Mayfield will be one of the guards on this team. But another guy that's a dark horse that could possibly be a starter for us is Matt Gono. He's a guy that me and K Styles love on the offensive line. If you remember last season, when Matt Gono was placed in the starting lineup, mainly it was due to injury. He did a great job of shutting down Nick Bosa for the Chargers, who's one of the top pass rushers in the game. And Matt Gono did a great job of holding him to 0 sacks in that game against the Chargers and pretty much 0 pressures. I think one thing about Matt Gono that is one of the assets of a player like a Matt Gono is his athleticism. To me, he's probably the most athletic offensive lineman on our team. I love his feet. If you watch the way that he plays the game, he plays with great physicality. He could be another guy that can push for that guard position or a starting position on his team. So it's going to be really interesting going into training camp to see which one of these players or which 5 of these players will be on the offensive line. Who's going to be the starters on the offensive line? Personally, if you ask me today who would be the starters, I would say at left tackle, of course, Jake Matthews. At the right tackle position, Chris Lindstrom. At the center position, Matt Hennessy. At the left guard position, I think it'll be Jalen Mayfield. And then at the right tackle, I think it's going to be Caleb McGarry. That's the guys I think just going into it, who I'm predicting to be the starters. But Matt Gono could push for that starting guard role, depending on how well Jalen Mayfield does in the training camp and how well he does in the preseason. It's all going to come down to preseason and come down to training camp. If Matt Gono proves to be a better swing tackle than a guy like Jalen Mayfield, I can easily see them having Matt Gono be the swing tackle, because he's a guy that can do it all as far as playing the left tackle and the right tackle position. But if Jalen Mayfield holds his own, they could, put Matt Gono in there at that left guard position and have a guy like Jalen Mayfield be that backup swing tackle. But you always want to have a solid swing tackle because you never know if NFL injuries are going to happen at some point. So you definitely want to have a solid guy who can play multiple positions, a guy who can play the left guard or the left tackle, excuse me, and the right tackle positions, because those are the most important positions on the offensive line is those tackle positions. That's the reason those guys make top dollar. So I definitely think so far it's been really, really interesting so far to see these guys, like I said, back on the grass at Flowery Branch. From what I've seen, it was a couple interceptions thrown today. A couple of interceptions by the linebacking core, and I talked about the linebacking core in my last show. I really expect the linebacking core this year to show out. Before Lil Khan had a pick today. I seen in the little clip that they showed of training camp, and I believe Michael Walker, who's coming into his second year, he's another guy that had an interception today at camp. So I'm really expecting these guys to cause turnovers. I'm really expecting some big things, as I told you guys, out of this defense, especially on that second level. Like I said, I think we have the best linebacking unit in the NFL, and I really think that these guys are going to be really successful. Now, another guy that's been missing from minicamp is Deion Jones. They said that Deion Jones has something going on off the field. Arthur Smith didn't disclose what's going on with a guy like Deion Jones, but they did state that Deion Jones is one of those guys that's been missing has been missing from minicamp as well. And we know Deion Jones is the captain of this defense and definitely a playmaker on this defense and one of the lightning rods for our team. So I really expect some huge things from Deion Jones and from this linebacking core. But I was excited to see these guys out there making plays. Even Matt Ryan, he looked pretty good. He looked like he had some zip on the football, other than what has been coming out in the media. It showed him make a nice throw to Frank Darby. They've showed a lot of clips of Frank Darby. He looks like he's a guy that's getting comfortable in camp. We've seen the unicorn, Kyle Pitts making plays, him and Hayden Hurst making plays. So I expect big things from those guys on the offensive side of the ball. Matt Ryan, I expect him to come out this year and be laser focused coming into this season, especially without Julio Jones. I expect Matt Ryan to be on his P's and Q's this year. And I expect him to be, like I said, in the MVP conversation. I really think that Matt Ryan is going to prove a lot of the haters wrong. A lot of people think that Matt Ryan, a lot of his success was because of Julio Jones, which Matt Ryan did have a lot of success due to Julio Jones, him being a great player. But I do believe that Matt Ryan still is a Pro Bowl quarterback, an elite quarterback in this game. And I expect him to have a big year for Atlanta Falcons and step up this season. I do want to jump really quick back into the chat and just see what you guys are saying in the chat. Let's see here. Mr. Lee says, "Oh yes, Coach Dean Pease is going to hide the linebackers in the defense." Yeah, most definitely. I think Dean Pease' schemes, he's going to confuse a lot of quarterbacks, especially these young quarterbacks that's coming into their first year. I really expect Dean Pease to confuse these guys like Zach Wilson of the Jets that we played. That game's going to be played in London this year. I expect Dean Pease and his defense is going to be licking their chops to play against a lot of these quarterbacks, especially these young guys who's not familiar and hasn't had a lot of tape on our Atlanta Falcons. The speed of our Atlanta Falcons, I think that the speed of this defense is really going to shine in this Dean Pease defense. And I believe that this zone blitzing schemes that Dean Pease is going to run is going to be crucial for our Atlanta Falcons, enforcing turnovers and getting guys off of their spot. Like guys like Tom Brady, who's in the division, guys like Jameis Winston, and guys that are veterans in this league that are mobile, these mobile quarterbacks in the game. First week, we have Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. He's one of those guys that's mobile, but he hasn't played a ton of NFL football. I believe he only played 4 games last year for the Eagles when Carson Wentz was benched. So I expect Dean Pease is going to throw a lot of different wrinkles at these guys and keep these guys off balance, especially with the multi-front defense that we're going to play with the 4-3 and 3-4. I really think that Dean Pease is going to be able to hide these linebackers, hide the blitzers that's coming, disguising different things, guys acting like they're coming on blitzes and dropping back into coverage. guys that look like they're dropping back into coverage all of a sudden coming on a cat blitz, whether it's a corner or a safety coming in, off the edge, kind of like Brian Poole and kind of like we used last year with Deion Jones and Keanu Neal later on in the season. We played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They kind of brought some of those zone blitzing schemes in that game. And I expect to see a lot of that out of a guy like Dean Pease to keep these quarterbacks and keep these offensive coordinators off balance. And that's what's key in the NFL is to keep these guys off balance where they don't know what's coming. Let's see here. And I see this. I like this right here. This comment. It's moving fast. Not this comment. Hold on, y'all. Well, this is a question in the chat here. What's up, Moses? From the A, he says, can this defense be top 15? I talked a little bit about this in my last show, and I like this comment or this question. I definitely think that the defense this year could definitely be top 15. I'm not too worried about yardage. Y'all hear Mad Mike say this all the time here at AFN. I'm mainly more worried about turnovers. We need to get the offense the ball back on short fields. You can't make a living off of driving, 80, 75 yards every single time to score touchdowns and to score points. So I'm looking for this defense to be opportunistic. I'm not too worried about, the yardage we give up. Now, I don't want to be like last year and give up as much as we gave up last year, because to me, last year, we were one of the worst teams when it came to yardage. I believe they said we were like top 5 if it was as far as the worst passing defenses all time under Dan Quinn last season. So I don't want the team to be as terrible as we were last year as far as giving up yardage, passing yardage. But I do expect this defense to be a top 15 defense, but I mainly worry about turnovers. If you have a defense that can get turnovers and get the ball back to your offense on short fields, that puts a lot of pressure on opposing teams to score touchdowns. And I really feel like that's going to be key for this Atlanta Falcons team. Even without Julio Jones being here, I do expect this offense to still be a top 10 offense in the league, even without Julio Jones. And I think that this team strength, our team strength is still the offense, even without Julio Jones here, with guys like Matt Ryan, Kyle Pitts, Mike Davis in the backfield, Hayden Hurst, Russell Gage, Alameda Zaccheaus, all of these guys that we have, Christian Blake. I mean, the list goes on of how many great offensive players. Cordell Patterson is another person that it was a Cordell Patterson sighting at minicamp. All of these explosive weapons, Jalen, not Jalen Hawkins, but the kid that we drafted, the rookie running back out of Louisville, Hawkins, like those guys are really explosive. So I expect this offense to be the strong point of our team. And if you remember, I always go back to the 2016 team because that was a team that got to the Super Bowl and got hot at the right time. If you have an opportunistic defense, in that year, I believe in yardage allowed, we were like the 27th or 28th defense on the team in the league at the time. So you don't have to have a great defense when it comes to yardage. You just have to be a good team in the red zone, meaning you have to be a bend but don't break defense. And in that 2016 season, we were a bend don't break defense. So I definitely think it's going to be key for our offense to continue to do what they do, put up 28 to 30 points a game, and allow this defense to be opportunistic. If they can put us on short fields, that's going to be key. Also, ground and pound, run the ball with the four-headed monster in the backfield or that three-headed monster. Continue to hand the ball off, and that'll keep the time of possession. That'll keep the defense off the field, which is the weaker side of our team at this point. So if we can have our offense continue to perform at the high rate that they've been performing at over the last 5 to 6 years, as far as putting up points, and we can put them on short fields, we can force teams to be one-dimensional and force teams to pass the ball and things of that nature and put them in compromising positions. But we do have a super chat in the building. Let me see if I can click on the super chat. It should pop up here in just a moment. Let's see. It says the Falcons have to get their what's it say? The Falcons have to get their organization clean during minicamp. We need to cut down on penalties. I definitely agree. And that's the wife with the super chat of $5. So I do appreciate that super chat. And when we get a super chat, we do got a bell. Y'all know we have the actual, I call it the victory bell. I think this will make K Styles proud. The victory bell. You know how when we score touchdowns in the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium, got a train horn, and you know how K Styles always has his harmonica. So I had to definitely go out and get me my own prop. So I appreciate that super chat, the $5 about a wife. But I definitely agree with the statement that she made. We definitely have to cut down on the penalties this year. That's going to be huge for our Atlanta Falcons to win games. And like I said, we have to have a defense that's opportunistic. If we have a defense that's opportunistic, takes the ball away, that's going to be huge for our Atlanta Falcons this year. Put us on short fields. And when you put up big points and shorten the game, teams are going to really have to be, forced to be one-dimensional, and that allows Dante Fowler and that defensive line to pin their ears back, especially with the blitzing schemes we're going to be running with Dean Pease. If you can shorten the game, keep the defense off the field, put up points, and get turnovers, and put Matt Ryan in this offense on short fields to score touchdowns, I really feel like that's going to help our Atlanta Falcons win a lot of games this year. And I expect also for our Falcons a lot of touchdowns in the red zone. That's been a huge problem as well for our Atlanta Falcons. That's something that's being overlooked, I think, by a lot of people, is the Arthur Smith effect as far as him calling plays. If you go look at Arthur Smith's play calling, I went and looked at one of DJ Shockley's breakdowns, and he's one of the basically he does a segment on the Atlanta Falcons, AtlantaFalcons.com page, and he basically showed in his film study basically how Arthur Smith creates space and gets players wide open. Like he schemes players wide open. It was numerous plays that DJ Shockley showed. If you go on YouTube and just search DJ Shockley or Atlanta Falcons, if you go to the Atlanta Falcons, the official Atlanta Falcons page, you can go and see the film breakdown. Mad Mike Sports here. Mad Mike also does a lot of great breakdowns, and I'm sure that he has some breakdowns that he can do of Arthur Smith. He's already did a couple breakdowns where he can show you how Arthur Smith in the red zone and things of that nature gets guys wide open. And really, that's the job of an offensive coordinator. And I really feel like that's been another issue for our Atlanta Falcons over the last couple of years. With Dirk Cutter at the helm, we didn't have an offensive coordinator that understood how to scheme guys open in the red zone, and we didn't have a physical style offensive line where we attempted to run the ball down team's throat. And I really think that's going to be huge in our red zone efficiency. It was a reason last year why Younghoe Koo was one of those guys that led the league in points, and basically mainly he led the league in points because we couldn't score touchdowns in the red zone. When we would get in the red zone, money zone, green zone area, we weren't doing a good job of scoring touchdowns. It was way too many drives last season that stalled within the 20-yard line where we couldn't score touchdowns. So that's another thing that I think is being overlooked with a guy like Arthur Smith. If you go look last season, the Tennessee Titans was one of the best teams, if not the top team, in red zone efficiency. So I expect the Atlanta Falcons this year for our red zone efficiency to improve. And with that being said, it looks like we got another super chat in the building. So let's get to that super chat. Let's see here. Hold on 1 second. If I can go on it. All right, so we got another $4.99. We got to do the victory bell, and it says Desmond Moore says, "In my opinion, it's time to rebuild." I do understand where you're coming from here. I don't really think that we need to rebuild. I disagree. I appreciate your super chat. The $4.99. But as far as rebuilding, I don't think that we need to rebuild. I really think that the Falcons at this point is reloading. Um, and when I say reloading, even though we let go of Julio Jones, we still have a ton of weapons on this team. As long as you have a quality quarterback, an elite quarterback in this game, as you know, without a quarterback, it's hard to win in this league. If you don't have a good quarterback, especially the way the rules are today, where defenses can't pin their ears back like the 2000 Ravens and the 85 Bears, it's hard to win a Super Bowl with a bad quarterback, but just a great defense. Prime example is the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears always have a great defense. They've had great defenses for years, but they've only won one Super Bowl, and that was in 1985. So in today's game, with the rules that the way that they are, you have to have a quarterback because it's a passing league. You have to have a quarterback. The quarterback is the most important position. So with us losing a guy like Julio Jones, Mad Mike talked about it in the last show, and we always talk about this all the time. You can replace production. Julio Jones production can be replaced. You can't replace Julio Jones as a talent, as an individual, but you can replace a guy like Julio Jones when it comes to the numbers. We can, between Kyle Pitts, Hayden Hurst, Alameda Zaccheaus, Frank Darby, and these guys, Calvin Ridley, we can replace the Julio Jones production. And if we just look at last season, Julio Jones missed 7 games, I believe, 7 or 8 games last season, and our team was still one of the top teams in the league as far as offensive passing yards. So even without a guy like Julio Jones last season, passing the ball wasn't the problem. Having enough receivers wasn't the problem last year. Guys like Russell Gage, guys like Kyle Pitts that we have now, Hayden Hurst, these guys were underused last year. To me, Hayden Hurst should have been a guy that at least had 800 receiving yards or at least 700 receiving yards or more. But he ended up, I believe he ended the season with only like either 500 or 600 receiving yards. But he should have had a lot more receiving yards last season with Julio Jones being out those 7 games. Mainly, it was just the schemes, the routes that he was running, those hook routes and those basic route concepts that Dirk Cutter was running pretty much hamstringed or prevented our offense from being as explosive as it could have been. I expect this offense to be a lot more explosive under a guy like Arthur Smith because his imagination is a lot better. Like he knows how to scheme guys open. He's really good at running different schemes, play action passes. He's good at mixing up the wildcat, jet sweeps. We're gonna see all kind of stuff. If you remember in Tennessee, they ran wildcat with King Henry. So we're gonna see a ton of different things out of this offense. If you remember a couple shows ago, I believe this was a Saturday show that Red Clay Sports did. It was Mad Mike Sports and Twisted Torch TV. Y'all definitely go hit up my boy Twisted Torch. He talked about us possibly running a 2 running back set. I can even see us running a wildcat where you have Cordell Patterson as the quarterback, and you have Hawkins on one side of him and Quadre Olison on one side of him, or Quadre Olison on one side of him and Mike Davis in the backfield with him, and he can either hand the ball off or Cordell Patterson can keep the ball and run with the football. So uh, I'm expecting Arthur Smith to shock a lot of people with the way that he's going to scheme up these plays. I expect us to be a lot more explosive, and I really think that this is going to be huge this year for our Atlanta Falcons as far as opening up the playbook. To me, last year the playbook was very vanilla. Too many 7-step drops where Matt Ryan's holding on to the football too long because guys weren't open. We really didn't have a lot of plays where he can dump the ball off to a running back or dump the ball off onto like a bubble screen. Pretty much that whole screen game and bubble screen game was eliminated for some reason last year. We didn't see it until the end of the year. They used Todd Gurley on a swing pass. I think that was against either the Kansas City Chiefs, I believe is when I seen it, where Todd Gurley had a nice like 15-yard reception on a swing pass or a wheel route. I'm expecting to see a lot of that out of a guy like Arthur Smith because he understands spacing. He understands how to put players in good positions and good matchups. And I expect Kyle Pitts and Hayden Hurst to have a field day in the middle of the field against linebackers. And then when teams try to, cover those guys by bringing in multiple corners and safeties and taking their linebackers out of the game, that's when you have a chance to audible and run the football with Mike Davis and run it down teams' throats when they take out their physical linebackers that can actually come downhill and stop the run. I really feel like our offense is going to be so explosive in the middle of the field that it's going to be hard for them to cover guys like Hayden Hurst and Kyle Pitts. Those guys are very hard to cover as far as linebackers and safeties because of their size and their speed. They're great athletes, and I really think that those guys are going to be the guys that's going to take up that production. I really feel like Kyle Pitts and Hayden Hurst, to me, are going to be the second and third option behind a guy like Calvin Ridley. I think a guy like Russell Gage, he's going to be a guy that's going to be used a little bit more on the outside. And you guys go check out Mad Mike Sports. He did a quick little film breakdown where he showed that Russell Gage is just not a slot guy, but he's a guy that runs great routes. Russell Gage has really developed into a great route runner, and he's a guy that you can use on the outside as well. We can't forget a guy like Kyle Pitts. I really feel like the Falcons went out and drafted a guy like Kyle Pitts because they knew that Julio Jones was on his way out of the door. None of us knew that Julio Jones wanted to trade, but that information came out to them before the draft that Julio Jones, from what the media has said. Now, we're going to say this is quote unquote because I don't know. None of us knows truly what happened between Julio Jones and the organization. But from what we're hearing, Julio Jones asked for a trade in March, right after the season was over. He basically demanded a trade. So I really believe they brought in a guy like Kyle Pitts to kind of replace a guy like Julio Jones. So don't be surprised if you see Kyle Pitts lined up a lot outside as well, because he's a guy like a Calvin Johnson. He's another Megatron type guy who can run, all the routes on the route tree. A guy that can, do those little juke routes and jerk routes. He's another guy that can run those slants with that big body. And I expect Kyle Pitts to be that guy right behind Calvin Ridley to lead this team in receiving yards. I really think that Kyle Pitts and Hayden Hurst are going to be those guys that's going to take up or lift the load of a Julio Jones. They're going to be able to fill the shoes or pick up some of that slack that Julio Jones we're going to be missing without a player like Julio Jones, without Julio Jones. But with that being said, we're going to get into some more of your comments and as well as take you guys questions as well. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A at this point of the show. So if you have some questions, definitely drop those questions in the chat. I love to answer your questions. And I want to just see what you guys have been talking about in the chat, because I know I've been kind of rambling. And shout out to the boy K Styles. I did see K Styles in the chat earlier. I was kind of rambling. There he goes, Just Styles, man. Y'all go check out Just K Styles. Hit that like, hit that subscribe button. He does a great job as well on his show on Monday nights, Kicking It with K Styles. So you guys definitely jump over there and hit that like button and the subscribe button as well. Let's see what you guys are talking about in the chat. Prove It says we had some touch football tackling last year. I think he's trying to say that we weren't good at tackling last year. Yeah, last year was not a good season for our defense. But you guys keep those questions coming. And I see Miss Maggie T in the chat as well. What's going on, Miss Maggie? Let's see what William Amy has to say. So can we get more pass rush? I definitely think that we're going to see a lot of turnovers this year. I definitely think, and I talked about this a little bit ago, William, about the zone blitzing schemes and things of that nature. But I definitely think that the pass rush will be improved. I talked a little bit about this in the last show as well. Basically, a guy like Grady Jarrett, I really feel like he's going to be one of the key pieces on this defense that's going to benefit from Dean Pease's scheme of these zone blitzes and quarterbacks not knowing and offensive lines not knowing where the pressure is coming from. I think because Grady Jarrett has that quick first step, he's going to be a guy that you can't just double team and triple team all of the time on the inside of on the offensive line because they're not going to know where that pressure is coming from, and it could be some miscommunication on the offensive side of the ball. We seen it last year with a guy like Deion Jones and Foye Oluokun later on in the season once Dan Quinn was fired, basically. We seen Jeff Albrecht, Raheem Morris, those guys were mixing and matching, calling plays on defense, and they started to use Deion Jones and Foye Oluokun's speed to get to the quarterback. And when you got guys with that type of speed, with a Foye Oluokun and Deion Jones' speed, unless you're Lamar Jackson, that ball has to come out now when those guys come on the blitz. And then usually you don't have time to get that ball off that quick, especially with these guys coming in, guys raising their hands, knocking footballs down and batting footballs. I really think that we're going to see a lot of turnovers due to the pressure that's going to be placed on quarterbacks. Also, the confusion. I really feel like it's going to be a lot of quarterbacks, especially these young quarterbacks that are in their first and second years. I expect these guys to be confused by Dean Pease's schemes and the blitzes that he throws out there. Dean Pease is a lot like Bill Belichick when it comes to exotic blitz schemes. He comes from that Baltimore Ravens background, New England Patriots. He's coached at many different destinations that had great defenses. And Dean Pease is one of those guys that worked with a Ray Lewis. If you guys go and check out Grady Jarrett, he has his own podcast with him and Kelsey Conway on AtlantaFalcons.com. And they had Ray Lewis as a guest on their show. And Ray Lewis basically talked about Dean Pease and how in the year that they won the Super Bowl, I believe that was 2012, the year that we lost in the NFC Championship to Colin Kaepernick and the 49ers. He basically talked about on that last drive where Dean Pease gives his defensive players freedom to call plays. And Ray Lewis basically stated on that last drive when the 49ers got stopped on the goal line and the Baltimore Ravens won that Super Bowl, Dean Pease basically told Ray Lewis, whatever you want to run right here, we're going to let you run whatever you think is best, whatever you see fit. And I really think that that's important because we've talked about this on numerous shows as well. Mike's talked about it, K Styles, I've talked about it, is in the last regime, for some reason, it seems like the players were muted. The guys couldn't really give their input on how they felt about the defense, or how they felt about the offense. And I really think that Arthur Smith, Dean Pease, and this coaching staff has clearly stated from day one that they are not yes men. Arthur Smith said he don't believe in having yes men. He want people that's going to bring what they feel, bring their input, bring their perspectives. And I really think that's important, especially for your players to be able to give you input because they're out there on the field. So they know, what works best for them. So I really think that's going to be important that you have coaches that's going to take the input of these players and allow these players to implement wrinkles as well of things that they like to see on the defense, things that they want to run on the defense. And you allow these guys to freelance a little bit. You remember when the Baltimore Ravens had Ed Reed on that defense? He was a guy who I think Richie Grant's going to kind of play that Ed Reed role. I'm not saying he's Ed Reed because Ed Reed to me is the greatest free safety to ever play in the NFL. But I do think that Richie Grant has some of that Ed Reed ability to be like a ball hawk, to be a guy you can use as a robber, where he can actually be a guy that's floating all over the field, kind of like a Troy Polamalu, where if you feel it, just do what you feel is right. Go ahead and roam and kind of, just react to where you think the football is going. And I really think that's very important, that you have players that can play full speed and you have coaches that trust these players, that allow these players to do what they do best. So I really think that we're going to see a lot of turnovers. If that answers your question, William, I definitely think the pass rush is going to improve. And I think that this defense is going to be better collectively because we're going to be a more aggressive defense. We're going to make offenses play on our terms. Let's see here. I want to get into some more of you guys' questions. Let's see. So Ultra Shadow 97 says, Utah Sports, we have yet to beat Tom Brady, and I think we can beat him. You think this year will finally be the year we beat him? I definitely think that this year is the year that we beat Tom Brady. I definitely think because we have them twice this year, I really think that defensive coordinators like Dean Pease, Rex Ryan. He's cut off that Rex Ryan cloth. Those type of coaches give Tom Brady fits. Defenses that blitz give Tom Brady fits because he's not a quarterback that's mobile. So Tom Brady is a guy that wants to get the ball out fast, and I really think that us bringing pressure, especially right up the A gaps in the middle of the field, where Tom Brady likes to step up in the pocket. He's a lot like Matt Ryan when it comes to being able to step up in the pocket. He's a traditional style quarterback that wants to be able to step into his throws, and having guys blitzing, right up the gut and blitzing from all over the place. Tom Brady is not a guy that can escape the blitz. So I do think that this is the year that we can give Tom Brady fits. If you remember, I go back to that Baltimore Ravens defense I was just talking about. They were a team that gave Tom Brady trouble in the playoffs. If you go back, maybe I'll say 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, they beat, I believe, New England 2 or 3 times. If you go back to those days when they had Ray Rice running the football, Joe Flacco and that team, they upset Tom Brady a couple times in the playoffs in Foxborough because Ray Lewis was one of those guys that was just as cerebral as a guy like Tom Brady. He understood film study. He understood what Tom Brady wanted to do, and it was a chess match. Anytime the New England Patriots and the Baltimore Ravens met up, Ray Lewis and Tom Brady were playing a game of chess. Also, if you remember T Sizzle, Terrell Suggs coming off that edge, he hated Tom Brady's guts. He was a guy on that defense that gave Tom Brady fits. Haloti Nada, coming right up right up that 8 gap as I talked about, gave Tom Brady fits because they always had those big players at that defensive tackle position that could put pressure on Tom Brady right up the middle, not allow him to step into those throws. And they had great linebackers, great safeties, and just a great defense as a whole. They had playmakers, but they always had defensive coordinators like Dean Pease, guys that were aggressive. Even the defensive coordinator that they have right now is a very aggressive defensive coordinator. All of those guys are cut off the Rex Ryan, Bill Belichick cloth. So I really think that Tom Brady is going to be in for it this year. I really think that this Falcons team can upset the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Really, what it's going to come down to is being able to put up points, because when you face the Buccaneers, because of how many explosive players they have, between Antonio Brown, Godwin, Mike Evans, Gronkowski, and then they have a load of a whole stable of running backs between and I believe they picked up this year Giovanni Bernard out of free agency, but they still also have Leonard Fournette. They're loaded on both sides of the or all over their offense, but on both sides of the ball, the Buccaneers are a loaded team. On their defense, they have one of the best defenses in the league. So I really think that it's going to be a dogfight. I do think that the Buccaneers are the team to beat in our division at this point, because they did win the Super Bowl last year, and they won. Or they actually didn't win the division last year. I believe the Saints won the division, but being that they're the Super Bowl champs, I definitely think that they're going to be a team to beat. We all know that the Saints and the Panthers are kind of in a rebuild mode. I think when we talk about the Falcons, those two teams in our division, I think, are the teams that are kind of in a rebuild situation because of their cap situation. The Saints had a worse cap situation than we had, so they had to cut a lot of their impact players. Trey Hendrickson, who led their team in sacks last year, he went to play with Cincinnati in free agency. They lost Janoris Jackrabbit Jenkins at the corner position. And then they're trying to re-sign Lattimore, who's their cornerback, their top cornerback. But I believe they had to kind of franchise tag him or something like that because they didn't have the money, or they tried to kind of restructure his contract until they can work out a huge deal for him. But they lost a lot of guys on that defense and on that offense. They lost Drew Brees, of course. They lost Emmanuel Sanders on the offensive side of the ball at wide receiver. So the Saints were in a really, really bad cap situation. On their side of the ball, the main guy you have to really worry about with the Saints is Alvin Kamara. If you can hold Alvin Kamara down, which we have the Alvin Kamara stopper and a guy like Deion Jones, I really don't think that we will have too much to worry about when it comes to the Saints. Now, a team that I think will improve this year is the Carolina Panthers. I think that they're a team that's kind of coming on this year, and they could be a team to watch. I could see the Saints being finishing last in our division because of the quarterback situation and because the Carolina Panthers are a team that's coming on with their new head coach last year, Matt Rule, who's a great offensive mind himself coming over from Temple University, and then them getting Sam Darnold to play that quarterback position. I'm not a fan of Sam Darnold. I don't believe Sam Darnold is the answer for them, but I do believe he's an upgrade over Teddy Bridgewater because of his arm strength and his ability to throw the ball down the field. And I do believe they have play callers there that are just like Arthur Smith when it comes to being multifaceted. They have a young offensive coordinator that they brought in from LSU a couple years ago, and he's a guy that understands mismatches as well. And then on the defensive side of the ball, the Carolina Panthers had done a great job of bringing in that defense. Jeremy Chin is a guy at that safety / linebacker position that I really like on their team. Their defensive end, I forget his name. He came in from the Florida State Seminoles a couple years ago, but he's another guy. That defensive end that they have, I can't think of his name right now. I think his name is Brian Burns. He's a guy that I really like as well, and I think that he's a guy that could be a Pro Bowler in the next couple years. And then they have that big nose tackle from my Auburn Tigers that they drafted last year. So with those guys, Derek Brown at that defensive tackle position, and them continuing to build on the defensive side of the ball, I really think that the Panthers could take a leap this year, and they could be a team that pushes the Saints to the bottom of the division this year. But I do agree with I do like the question. I do think that we can um, definitely beat the Buccaneers. I really think that we possibly will split with the Buccaneers this year. I don't know about sweeping them because they are the defending champs, and I do have respect for Tom Brady and that offense because they were able to bring back pretty much all of their weapons and re-sign all of their weapons. Let's see here. Let's get back into your comments. All right. Let's see. So Jamari Williams says, Jew, how do you think Hayden Hurst will fit in Arthur Smith's offensive scheme? I think that Hayden Hurst will be a guy similar to Kyle Pitts. I expect Hayden Hurst and Kyle Pitts to have big seasons this year because he loves to run those double tight end sets with a guy like Arthur Smith. I really can see those guys eating up the middle of the field. Like you don't have anybody that can really match up with a guy like Hayden Hurst. You don't have a guy that can match up one-on-one with a guy like Kyle Pitts in the middle of the field because of their size, their speed, and them going up the seams and things of that nature. I really could see them being Hayden Hurst being having a very, very good season. I could really see him being a guy that can have anywhere between say 600 and 800 receiving yards between him and Kyle Pitts. One of those guys is going to end up being the guy that eats the most. It just depends on how defensive coordinators decide to guard these guys because they're going to have to double team. They're possibly going to double team a guy like Kyle Pitts, which is going to create the one-on-one matchups for guys like Hayden Hurst. So Hayden Hurst may end up having more touchdowns or having more receiving yards than a guy like Kyle Pitts because I really think after Kyle Pitts has a 100-yard game or has a big game, after that, teams are going to panic and teams are going to try to shut him down. So, excuse me, I definitely think that a guy like Hayden Hurst is going to benefit hugely from a guy like Arthur Smith because Arthur Smith loves tight ends. If you go look at last year, guys like Jonnu Smith had the best season of his career last year. Him and Fisker was the guys that were used a lot. I believe that Jonnu Smith was the guy that had, I think he was like second behind AJ Brown in receiving yards, if I'm not mistaken, for the Tennessee Titans last year. So I definitely think that because Arthur Smith believes in physical football, believes in running the football, and everything predicated off the run and that play action, I can see Hayden Hurst and a guy like Kyle Pitts being like the number 2 option. A guy whose numbers may go down a little bit this year will be Russell Gage because I think that Calvin Ridley, Hayden Hurst, and Kyle Pitts. I think those are going to be the guys that's going to be the staples of this offense. And then I think everyone else will be brought in on different situations. Like guys like Zacchaeus, he's going to be brought in on certain situations to take the top off the defense or to come in and do a jet sweep really quick or come in and catch a quick bubble screen. He's not going to be a guy that's going to be seen on the field unless injuries, unless we have an injury or something like that. I don't expect guys like Christian Blake and Zacchaeus to get a whole lot of snaps. I think the staples of this offense is going to be that running game between the Hawkins and Davis in the backfield and Cordell Patterson. Between those three, that three-headed monster, and then between Calvin Ridley, Hayden Hurst, and Kyle Pitts, I think that those guys are going to be the main staples of the offense when it comes to passing the ball down the field. We'll see a couple explosive plays, probably, like I said, from Zacchaeus and Frank Darby. But other than that, I think that Hayden Hurst is going to have a big season. He's going to have a lot better season than he had last year with a guy like Dirk Cutter, who didn't believe in passing the ball to tight ends. But that was a great question, Jabari. Carrie says, Drew, did you see Bleedy Ray sign with the Raiders today? Also, is it September 12th yet? I know, ready for the season to start to see the look of our new team. I completely agree. And I like this comment, Carrie. I did see my man Bleedy Way Wilson. You guys know that I'm a huge Bleedy Way Wilson fan. He should have got more snaps last year when he was here with our Falcons, because it seemed like every time he got on the field, something good happened. Either he came down with an interception or he was a reason that our team had a crucial stop. He got the game-winning interception last year against the Panthers. He came in and got an interception against the Chicago Bears before they benched Mitch Trubisky and brought in Nick Foles, who ended up coming back to beat us in that game. But I did see that Bleedy Way signed with the Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders. So that's also some Atlanta Falcons news for you guys. If you didn't see, I believe he signed like a one-year deal with the Las Vegas Raiders. We wish him happy trails. But he was one of my favorite unsung heroes of our Atlanta Falcons. One of those guys that wasn't a household name, but he was a guy when he came in, he got his opportunities. He was a playmaker. So I definitely think Bleedy Way is going to do well with the Raiders. They have a veteran coach over there, John Gruden, and Mike Mayock, who's their GM. And I think that they're going to definitely put Bleedy Way on the field, whether it's just in special teams or maybe as their nickel corner. But I definitely think that Bleedy Way is going to have impact. He's pretty much been an impact player on the Atlanta Falcons anytime he got the opportunity. So that definitely was, a good signing for the Raiders, a solid signing. Bleedy Way is not a guy that's going to get you 10 interceptions in the season, but he's definitely a playmaker, definitely one of the smarter football players in the league. And let's see here. Mr. Motivator, he says, what did you think about Lee Smith? Lee Smith is a guy that's come over to be mainly a blocking tight end, to be physical. He's not here to actually catch passes and things of that nature. Could I see the Falcons sneaking him out for a pass or a touchdown this season in the red zone? Sure, where he may act like he's blocking and then sneak out of the backfield or something like that and catch a touchdown, sneak behind the linebackers. I definitely can see Lee Smith possibly getting like 2 or 3 touchdowns this year where he may get a sneak touchdown in there. But he mainly was brought over to bring that nastiness to this offense. He's a guy that's kind of like an extra offensive lineman. They're going to use him to block, use him to be a veteran in the locker room. He's a guy that's going to help these young guys like Kyle Pitts, also help Hayden Hurst, because Hayden Hurst is a guy that's been in the league, I think, about 3 or 4 years. But Lee Smith is a guy I believe that been in the league like 10 years. So he's a guy that has a ton of experience. He talked about wanting to play for Matt Ryan and wanting to keep guys away from Matt Ryan as far as blocking. So I can see Lee Smith being one of those guys that's mainly just here to be an enforcer. I don't think that Lee Smith, will see a ton of playing time as far as going out for passes. He even said that in his media session when they talked to him. He had his interview. He basically said, I'm not here to catch passes. I'm here to, protect Matt Ryan, make sure Matt Ryan stays upright. And then he's here to be a blocking tight end and run situations. And then, like I said, they may sneak him out for a quick touchdown pass when teams are least expecting it, because Arthur Smith, like I said, is great. at scheming guys open, where they might act like we're going to, bring in a guy like Quadri Olison, where teams are thinking we're going to try to ground and pound, and then quick play action pass, and Lee Smith may be wide open for a touchdown. But I don't really expect a whole lot out of a guy like Lee Smith, other than just being a guy that's going to bring physicality in the blocking game and being a guy that's going to, provide veteran leadership in the locker room. Let's see. We have another question here, and it says, "How you think Cordero Patterson will perform?" This is a great question. I think that Cordell Patterson will be a guy that we mainly use as a running back, and a guy, like I said, as a Swiss Army knife. I could see him being kind of like a Mohamed Sanu when it comes to being able to run the Wildcat. He mainly was brought over to Atlanta Falcons to be a special teams player, to give us some pop on special teams. And I definitely think that a guy like Cordell Patterson is a guy who's been able to score touchdowns on kickoff returns. I believe Matt Mike called him Baby Hester. He's a guy I think that's either leads the league currently. He leads the league in touchdowns, kickoff returns, return for touchdowns. So he's a guy that's very dangerous on kickoff returns, very dangerous in punt return situations. And he's also dangerous if you just hand him the football or give him the football out in space, whether it's on a quick wheel route or whether it's him lining up in the slot. He's a guy that you can use on jet sweeps and things of that nature. And he's a guy that's also a veteran, been around the league, played for the Patriots, played for the Bears, started out with the Minnesota Vikings. But he's a guy that I seen today that was at minicamp. They showed him actually in the backfield as a running back. And on our depth chart, he's listed as a running back. So I think Cordell Patterson is going to be a part of that 3 to 4 headed monster. Davis, Mike Davis, Javian Hawkins, Quadri Olison, and Cordell Patterson. I think that's going to be the 4-headed monster. I think all 4 of those guys will make the roster. And I think from game to game, depending on who the matchup is, we're going to see, all of those guys. I think that they're going to do a lot better job this year with our coaching staff, or not just relying on the starter running back. Because last season we seen guys like Quadri Olison didn't get an opportunity. Guys like Brian Hill didn't get a ton of opportunities. Those guys were mainly on the bench. Most of the snaps was given to Todd Gurley. And then later on in the season, they elevated Ito Smith. So this year, I think that they're going to do a lot better job of getting all of these guys involved and putting these guys in positions to succeed. Like if you have a guy like Cordell Patterson or Javian Hawkins, throw these guys a quick screen, run those outside zone runs, and, run toss plays with these guys that have the ability to take the ball, take it to the house from the outside where they have space. Guys like Mike Davis, give that ball to him and allow him to run between the teeth of the defense. The same thing with a guy like Quadri Olison. I think they're going to put these guys in positions where they can succeed and where these guys can actually do what they do best. But that is a great question. I think Cordell Patterson is going to have an impact. I think his biggest impact on this Atlanta Falcons team this year will be felt on special teams. Because if you remember that over the last couple of seasons, we haven't been good on the special teams as far as returns. We had a lot of guys that just were fair catching a lot. We had Justin Hardy here over the last couple of years. He was a guy that was fair catching the ball a lot. When we had Brandon Powell, I believe his name is, last year, he was a guy that was also doing a lot of fair catches and wasn't looking to return the ball. Where you have a guy like Cordell Patterson, he's extremely aggressive. He's a guy that will return the ball, out of his own end zone and take it to the house. So I definitely think that it's going to be important to have a guy like Cordell Patterson on this special teams that can flip the field. As I talked about earlier, you don't want to have to drive 80, 70 plus yards every single time, 12 play, 15 play, 14 play drives. You need explosive plays to make the quarterback's job a lot easier and to make the offense's job a lot easier. So if we can get the ball, a good return and maybe return it to the other side of the field on the opposite side of the 50, that's going to be really important for Atlanta Falcons is when it comes to field position, winning the field position battle, because that's something we didn't do a good job of last season as well. All right, we have another question here. Jamari says, Jude, do you want Darby or Russell to be the second wide receiver? I want the guy who performs the best. Whoever performs the best, I'm like Arthur Smith. I don't play favoritism. Personally, I think that Russell Gage is going to beat out a guy like Frank Darby just because of his experience. Russell Gage, if you remember when he came in, let me get a quick drink of water. Hold on. Okay. So, excuse me. I believe that Frank Darby is a lot like a Russell Gage when Russell Gage came in early on. If you go and look at the first couple seasons that Russell Gage was on the team, he was a guy mainly that was used as a special teamer. Um, he wasn't a guy that was mainly used as a wide receiver. He didn't get his opportunity as a wide receiver until Muhammad Sanu was let go. Once Muhammad Sanu was let go, Russell Gage kind of spread his wings and was able to benefit from getting more snaps, but he was a guy that needed to develop. And I think the same thing with Frank Darby. He's going to be a guy that's going to be used like Alameda Zaccheaus, who I talked about a little bit ago. I think that Darby's going to be a guy that's going to be inserted in special teams to be like a gunner. And then I could see him being the guy who could possibly earn snaps, a few snaps here and there, if he's giving somebody a breather that comes off the field, or if a player gets injured, because guys get injured, have injuries all the time, whether they have to come off the field because they have a hard hit and they possibly have a concussion or something like that. You may see a guy like Frank Darby thrown on the field for a couple plays, but I don't expect Darby to beat out a guy like Russell Gage for the number 2 wide receiver spot. I think at this point, Russell Gage has polished his skill set as far as being able to run routes and things of that nature. Because I think Russell Gage is in his 3rd or 4th season with our team at this point, so he's been a guy who came out of LSU and kind of has had a chance to develop under Julio Jones, under Calvin Ridley. So I don't see any of these young guys necessarily taking Russell Gage's position. If anybody's going to take some of the wide receiver snaps away from Russell Gage, it's going to be Kyle Pitts and Hayden Hurst. Those are the guys that's going to actually limit a guy like Russell Gage. I don't really think it's going to be a guy like Frank Darby. I do think Frank Darby is going to get playing time. He's just not going to see a ton of playing time, as much playing time as I think you guys think he's going to see. All right. So Tony Wright says, did you hear that the former Atlanta Falcon Devondre Campbell signed a 1-year deal with Green Bay, and last Thursday, free agent Darquez Dennard signed a 1-year deal with the Arizona Cardinals? I didn't actually hear that. So y'all breaking news, Atlanta Falcons news to me. I didn't know that Devondre Campbell signed with the Green Bay Packers. I do think that this is a good move for a team like Green Bay because they have struggled with finding guys that can actually cover as linebacker. They didn't have good coverage linebackers, and they really didn't have good linebackers at all. Since they lost guys like AJ Hawk and Clay Matthews, who was mainly an outside linebacker, a guy that was used to blitz and things of that nature, the Green Bay Packers have kind of struggled to find solid linebackers. So I do think that that's a solid signing for the Green Bay Packers because they have good defensive ends and they have a good defensive line. I really felt like the weakness for that Green Bay Packers defense was their linebackers. I think that is a great signing on a 1-year deal with a guy like Devondre Campbell. As long as they know how to use Devondre Campbell. Devondre Campbell is not a guy you want to put in coverage a whole lot. He's a guy that you want to let play downhill and play physical in the running game. So he's a great linebacker at stopping the run. He's not the best linebacker in coverage, but I definitely think he's an upgrade over the linebackers that they've had the last couple of years there in Green Bay. As far as Darquez Dennard, he's a guy that I wanted the Falcons to bring back, but I know we had a tight salary cap situation, and I think us bringing in Fabian Monroe, who's the corner out of Washington that we brought in on that 1-year deal, I definitely think that he's a guy that's going to be a guy that can really come in and take the spot of a guy like Darqueze Dennard. I do think that Darqueze Dennard, though, had a solid season for our Falcons. If you remember in that game against the Chicago Bears, he had a great interception going up against a guy like Allen Robinson, who's one of the better wide receivers in the game that doesn't get a lot of credit there for the Chicago Bears. And Darqueze Dennard did a good job of knuckling up and playing physical with him. He had a nice interception on a contested catch by Allen Robinson. He did a good job of snatching the football away. And Darqueze Dennard was a cornerback that was physical. He put me in the mind a little bit of Brian Poole and his physicality, but I think the Falcons did a good job at replacing him by bringing in a Fabian Monroe, somebody who's a little bit faster than a Darqueze Dennard, and I think he's a little bit better in coverage than a guy like Darqueze Dennard. So I definitely think that that's a good signing for the Arizona Cardinals, and definitely a great signing for the Green Bay Packers. Probably a better signing by Green Bay because they've really struggled at the linebacker position. Arizona has been pretty solid in their secondary, but I do think Darqueze Dennard could possibly be that nickel cornerback for them because they did lose Patrick Peterson, who went over to the Minnesota Vikings. So that's a big signing for Arizona as well. But I do appreciate you breaking that news because I didn't know that either one of those guys signed those one-year deals. Those went under the radar. And this is a great question here by William Amy. He says, Jew, who do you see us looking at in free agency with the money we have left? This is a great question. And actually, this is by Antonio Holloway. I think this is a great question by Antonio. Be honest, I'm not too sure. I did see Antoine Smitty Smith did a video, and y'all go check out Antoine Smitty Smith as well. He's definitely a great Atlanta Falcons YouTuber as well. He's been a guest here on our show here. Him and Matt Mike have that connection as well. And I consider him one of the big bros in the game. And he basically talked about Geno Atkins, I believe his name is, plays that nose position or 3-tech, kind of like a Grady Jarrett. I think he's still out there in free agency. That would be really interesting if we can bring in a guy like Geno Atkins. He's a guy that's really physical. Actually, I believe he wears the same number as Grady Jarrett, number 97, but he's a playmaker. He's a guy that played his whole career pretty much in Cincinnati, but I believe Cincinnati cut him. I don't know how much money he's looking for on the free agent market, but if we can get him and Grady Jarrett together, that could be something that would be really scary in the middle of that defense if we can get a guy like Geno Atkins. But from my understanding, from what I've read, the Falcons will have about $8 million left over after we sign our rookie class. So I definitely think a guy like Geno Atkins, another guy that I've seen, I don't know how much money he's looking for, is Melvin Ingram. He's a defensive end that played with the LA Chargers pretty much his whole career. But he's a guy that I believe was cut by the LA Chargers, but they didn't pick up his contract. So he's a guy I can see the Falcons maybe going after. If we're looking for a veteran type guy that can come in and be an edge rusher for us, he's more of a traditional defensive end, but he's a guy that has had, double sack, 10 plus sack seasons in his career. He was a guy on the opposite side of Nick Bosa. So I definitely can see him being a guy that the Falcons may look at. Those are the only two guys right off the top of my head I can see the Falcons possibly trying to go after. But that's a great question, and I will be doing a video once I go and look to see what players are in the free agent market, because the Falcons will have about, like I said, about $8 million, which you can definitely sign a player to at least a 1-year deal for $8 million, and you can possibly get a solid player for that 1 year, $8 million, like on a prove it deal. So I definitely expect the Falcons to use that and try to bolster the defense. And I'm gonna take a few more questions here because we're coming up on about a hour and a half. So I'm gonna take a few more questions and then I'm gonna hop off. But if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, please hit that subscribe button here. If you haven't hit that like button, please hit that like button for your boy as well. And as I always stated as well, don't just hit the like button here or hit that subscribe button here, but also go over to Atlanta Falcons Nation, hit that subscribe button for the whole crew there as well. But I'm gonna take a few more questions and then I'm gonna hop off here. But I appreciate each and every one of you guys' questions and each and every one of you guys in the chat. Tony Wright, he says, What are your thoughts on us possibly signing a veteran D tackle Geno Atkins, free agent Jarrell Casey? Yeah, and I just talked about Geno Atkins. Now Jarrell Casey, he's a guy that has some familiarity with a guy like Arthur Smith because he was there in Tennessee. So maybe that connection somehow, some way, Arthur Smith can reach out to his agent or reach out to Jarrell Casey. Maybe he wants to play for his former one of the former coaches on the team, even though Arthur Smith was coaching the offense. They were in that same, locker room. So I'm assuming they have some type of familiarity with each other, and maybe they have some type of relationship where maybe Jarrell Casey, wants to come over to Atlanta and play for one of the former coaches of the Tennessee Titans. Who knows at this point? But I definitely think that Jarrell Casey will also be a solid signing for our team. You guys know I love the big uglies, the guys in the up front. Everything starts and the game is won right there in the trenches. So if we can bring in somebody to bolster this defensive line, it would be great. Another guy that's out there that I wanted to mention as well is I believe Justin Houston, who's been a great defensive end over his career with the Kansas City Chiefs, and I believe he played with the Indianapolis Colts last year. He's a guy that still has a little bit left in the tank. He could be another guy that the Falcons look at if they're looking for a veteran pass rusher. He's another guy. I believe he has over 100 sacks in his career. If not, he's really close. So he's definitely one of the best defensive ends or best pass rushers in this generation. Is a guy like Justin Houston. I believe Justin Houston played at the University of Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe he wants to come home and play in front of his hometown fans. Maybe he wants to come and be a part of our Atlanta Falcons, kind of like how we did with Bruce Irvin a couple years ago when we brought him in towards the end of the season. Maybe a guy like Justin Houston is a guy that wants to come over and be a defensive end for our Atlanta Falcons. But with that being said, I'm gonna take maybe two more questions, and then I'm gonna hop off here. Let's see here. Two. Jamari says, "Ju, what is a free agent you would like to sign?" I pretty much stated the guys that I would like to sign for our Atlanta Falcons. The ones that I threw out, as far as on the defensive side of the ball, I wouldn't mind seeing a guy like Geno Atkins. I wouldn't mind seeing a guy like Melvin Ingram come over to our Atlanta Falcons. But other than that, those are pretty much the guys that, off the top of my head, Justin Houston, I wouldn't mind seeing those guys because I believe they bring some veteran leadership. And I think that those guys could come in and bolster the defensive line. I really don't think that we need another offensive weapon. I think we have enough weapons on the offensive side. Could they possibly bring in another wide receiver because we lost Julio Jones to be even more explosive? Maybe. I'm just not too sure because I don't have the free agent list right here in front of me to tell you guys what guy I would be interested in. As far as another wide receiver that's possibly out there on the free agent waiver wire or free agent out there. But I am going to do another video. Like I said, once I go and see who's still out there, I'll do a video for you guys to see, once we sign and we have that 8 million left, I'll make another video basically stating who I think, I may be interested in signing. Right now, off the top of my head, I'll say Geno Atkins, Melvin Ingram. Those are the two guys that on the top of my head, I think I would go with. And then I'm going to answer maybe two more questions, and then we're going to call it a night. I'm going to give you guys your night back because I know you guys want to check out the NBA playoffs, and I'm going to go ahead and check out the NBA playoffs as well. But I do appreciate each and every one of you guys. Let's see here. This is an interesting question from Jerome. He says, "Do you think we wait for a surprise cut before we sign a free agent?" That may be a smart idea. Maybe not go after one of these guys that are still a free agent, that aren't still free agents or on the free agent market. Maybe we wait to the camp, training camp is close to being over, where teams have to cut down to their 53-man roster, and maybe it's a gym that we can sign, right after the cut or place. That could be something that our Falcons do, and that may be the smartest move because maybe there's a player that we are targeting, but we're just waiting to see if those guys make the team. That definitely would be a smart strategy. Maybe we just wait and see, but who knows? I don't know what Terry Fontenot and these guys are thinking at this point, especially from what went down with Julio Jones and things of that nature. Maybe they had all along a player that they've been targeting that's a free agent, didn't have money to sign them. So maybe they sign somebody right away. Once we get all of the rookies signed, they may go after a guy. They may have a guy that we've already targeted. But at this point, we're just gonna have to wait and see. I'm not too sure of what direction we're gonna go in. And let's see. I'm gonna do one more question here. And we're going to answer another question from Tony Wright. And this is going to be the last question of the night. He says, Jew, we have a very young secondary, really young, in my opinion. Do you believe that our starting safeties, Jalen Hawkins and Richie Grant? I don't know if those guys will be the starters. I like Jalen Hawkins a lot, and I like Richie Grant. I think Richie Grant has a chance to be the starter. I don't see Jalen Hawkins being the starter. The reason I don't think that Jalen Hawkins will be a starter is because he's still kind of wet behind the ears. He was a rookie last season. None of the rookies, had the chance to go through the actual mini camp. Due to COVID last year, everything was virtual, so they didn't actually get the rookie mini camps and things of that nature last season. So you might as well say that a lot of these guys that were rookies last year are kind of like rookies coming in this year as well, unless you were a rookie that started. Like AJ Terrell was a guy that got a ton of game experience, so I think he'll be ready in year 2 to take that leap. A guy like Jalen Hawkins is going to have to prove it in the preseason and prove it in training camp to beat out guys like Eric Harris, who we brought over, and Deron Harmon. I think that Deron Harmon and Eric Harris are going to be guys that's going to go in and out, and we're going to see guys kind of used in rotation. I don't think that we're going to have starters necessarily as safeties. I think it's going to be up to the down and distance and things of that nature. I think that Richie Grant will start right away because he has that ability. But a guy like Jalen Hawkins, even with a Richie Grant, I think that we're going to see Deron Harmon, Eric Harris on the field sometime together. I think on certain down and distances, you'll see them put Richie Grant out there. And then on occasion, they may even throw Jalen Hawkins out there. Now, I think Jalen Hawkins will be a special teams player as well, mainly. And maybe he can earn the starting role, or maybe he can earn more playing time if he goes out there and makes plays in the preseason, or if he goes out there and beat out one of these guys during training camp. But I don't think that that Jalen Hawkins and Richie Grant will be the starters. I think it'll be Richie Grant and probably Eric Harris, and then I can see Deron Harmon and Eric Harris being the guys that split most of the time. I don't see Richie Grant coming off of the field a whole lot because I think he has a lot more to offer than a guy like Eric Harris and a guy like Deron Harmon because of his athleticism. I think Richie Grant is the playmaker type that you need, especially in today's NFL. I think he can be used kind of like a Buda Baker, the Honey Badger. I can see him being used as that guy who's going to be the playmaker, the flow sideline to sideline. But with that being said, this been your boy Jew. Really appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning in tonight. I'm gonna give you guys your Wednesday back. I really appreciate all of you guys' support. Definitely continue to tune in. I'll come back with the next episode next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But I do appreciate all of the questions. I appreciate the super chats. But until then, this being your boy Jew. I'll holler at you guys in the next video. As always, Falcons Nation, rise up. And as always, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe button. Like I said, not just here on Jew Talk Sports, but also Atlanta Falcons Nation, Mad Mike Sports, Just K Styles, Twist Torch TV, J Rock over on Twitch. Definitely go give these guys a subscribe, a like. We really appreciate you guys. We're going to continue to keep pushing the culture forward here at Atlanta Falcons Nation. Continue to give you guys the stats, the facts, and the truth and that positive Atlanta Falcons content. With that being said, it's been your boy Jew. I'll holler at you guys in the next video. As always, Falcons Nation, rise up. Peace.